Welcome to the Innovation Ecosystem Podcast. We interview remarkable and thought-provoking guests about innovation, leadership, and change in the world of business. Whether you're an executive or an entrepreneur, our objective is to help you and your organisation create an entrepreneurial culture, become more innovative, and better able to respond to change. Each week, we'll deconstruct world-class performance from the arenas of business, academia, science, and sports. Each week, you can expect key insights, fresh perspectives, and proven tools you can use straight away to make you more successful professionally and personally. With your host, Mark Bidwell.
Hello, this is Mark Bidwell, and welcome back to the Innovation Ecosystem Podcast. My guest today is Pamay Bassey, who is an accomplished entrepreneur, author, and also professional development expert. She works in a company called BlackRock, which is the world's largest asset management firm, where she's global head of learning platforms and professional development. And in addition to that, she is part of an exclusive group of women called 40 over 40, which is a group set up by Whitney Johnson, who was one of our early guests in the show in season 1. And if you haven't listened to that episode about disruption, personal disruption, I do urge you to listen to it. It's one of my favorites and also one of the audience's favorites, one of the most downloaded shows throughout the year, and it's well worth a listen. But anyway, Whitney has created this group, 40 over 40, which is comprised women who are innovative, disruptive, and making an impact in the world. And Pamay is one of these. And when I caught up with her, I was really keen to understand specifically how she was able to take this journey of hers, which culminated in her writing a book called 52 Weeks of Worship, and learning about that journey in which she visited a different place of worship every week for a year. And more importantly, I think, learning about how can she take those experiences, those insights, those profoundly transformative conversations she had over the course of the year, and how does she use them back in the corporate environment. So very keen to learn what value she extracted from that journey, and she goes into that. She also talks about, what it's like to be a lifelong learner and an intrepreneur. And finally, she goes into detail about what BlackRock is able to benefit, or how BlackRock is able to benefit from her experience over the years. So it's a fascinating conversation. Urge you to listen hard. She really is a very interesting and accomplished woman who I think you will find has got a lot of valuable insights into innovation, into lifelong learning, into the world of business, into entrepreneurship.
Okay, good morning. This is Mark Bidwell from the Innovation Ecosystem. Now with me today is Pamay Bassey, who is Global Head of Learning Platform and Professional Development for BlackRock, which is the world's largest asset management firm. Prior to this, Pamay founded and ran for 13 years her own firm specializing in creating innovative educational environments. And Pamay is also Chief Experience Officer of the My 52 Weeks of Worship project, which she started in 2010 and culminated in a book with the same title. And finally, and last but not least, she's recently been nominated for 40 Women Over 40, which is awarded to women who are reinventing and disrupting, and most importantly, making an impact. So welcome to the show, Pamay.
Hi, it's nice to be here. Thank you.
So that's the formal bio, and it's a very impressive one. But, how do your friends or family describe who you are and what you do, Pamay?
That's so great. Sometimes it's funny where people just really don't know what I do. Some people say I work with computers because I have a technical background, but many who know kind of the different things I'm involved in would call me an educator, and would say that I use my different talents to communicate and connect and enrich those around me in various contexts. So I think somewhere between technology and education is where people think I sit, and where I actually do sit, I would say.
And you started your professional career with Accenture, and then founded your own company. I mean, how did you? What led up to you doing that?
That's actually, I say I was born and raised professionally at Accenture. Came out of university, and Accenture was doing some innovative work with Northwestern University around applying artificial intelligence ideas and thoughts to the field of education, and really wanting to take the knowledge from the AI community about how people learn and how people process information, and use that to create engaging and interesting educational environments in the corporate arena. So I was able to ride that wave, spent many years in consulting in the US and in Germany for Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies, really taking some time to create those sorts of educational environments where people could step into a role and learn by doing. And when I left Accenture, I ended up going to a technology startup. I went to school in the Bay Area here in the United States and had a lot of friends who were doing kind of foundational work in the area of technology and thought that I should be doing the same. And this mobile technology startup, I was doing more kind of user experience, voice user interfaces, trying to figure out how to share information on a number of interfaces, mobile technology, web, voice. That company, unfortunately, died after about a year and a half, as startups sometimes do. And when that happened,
when was this?
This was in the late 90s, so quite a long time ago. I'm dating myself, but I was at the end of the, right around the 2000 area where I was working for the startup company. And then decided after that I would go independent. And it wasn't a declaration, I'm starting a company. It was really started with me kind of doing contract work. I was doing research, educational research for universities here in the States. I was teaching online at online universities, information and technology type courses, and doing the design and development of learning environments, which is really my bread and butter. And after a few years of doing that, kind of as an independent, realized that I had started, a consulting company, if you will, formalized it, and then went on to continue doing that kind of work for the next 12, 13 years.
And when you say learning environments, I mean, what does that actually mean? I mean, I think you talked about the company was specializing in creating innovative educational learning environments. What does that mean?
Sure. So what it really started out meaning, because technology-enabled learning is my real interest, is trying to figure out how to use technology to create courses and training and coaching that would meet some specific goals. So imagine a company coming to me and saying, hey, we have 5,000 managers. We want to teach them this specific skill. We want to do it in a virtual way. We wanted to do it in a blended way where part of the learning happens kind of face-to-face and part of it happens via technology, and trying to figure out the best combination of the two, and what the activities would be, what the content would be, what technology would be using. And so a lot of the projects I worked on kind of had that as the mandate.
So I mean, it's in learning environment from a technology point of view rather than a physical office environment perspective.
It started out really honestly as a technology environment, but especially as we got closer to the present day, there's been more of a desire to what we call blended learning, where some of that happens in the face-to-face, and we don't want to lose the magic that happens when people are in the same space and are able to learn from each other, but also don't want to avoid innovating in the space where technology can be of service, whether that be delivering a module prior to the face-to-face meeting, or some sort of simulation where you're engaged and immersed in a virtual world, and you're able to go through specific activities, learn from the decisions you make in that virtual environment, et cetera. So it started out for me actually just being more of like just an interest in seeing how technology could be of service in the educational space. But then, the reality now is that it has to really be a solution agnostic action, where we're trying to figure out, okay, well, what do we want people to learn? What do we want them to be able to do after they're done with this learning experience? And so what is the best delivery, whether that be face-to-face or using technology or some combination of the two?
Because, I mean, I suppose back in those days, if I remember rightly, there were companies like Docent and Sapient and all these startups which, had enormous valuations, which were all playing in this broad space, and a lot of them got washed out, as your company did. But today, what's the state of the art? Has it moved on significantly from those early days of learning management systems and things?
I think there's a spectrum, right? So, I mean, back in the day, we were doing learning when there wasn't even an internet. So it was CD-ROM based. We're delivering content via CD-ROM, very heavy video, interesting ways of using media to create scenarios that could put learners really in that virtual space. And then, of course, when the internet came, then we had to kind of back away from that rich media because the internet had to catch up, right? We're having bandwidth situations and how much video can you really send through the wires, et cetera. And so now there's a spectrum, right? So there's e-learning, if you will, has standardized in some arenas where, you have things that are as standard and perhaps I might say uninspiring as a PowerPoint come to life and everyone knows the next button, the back button, or pressing a button and going to take a nap and coming back and doing the next slide. It has its place, that kind of very, very standard e-learning. But on the other end, I talked to a CEO of a company last week, and they're using machine learning to create learning environments for elementary school students in the area of math, and really trying to engage with students and saying, I want to know where you are, what you know. Here's for example, a math example. We're going to learn from whatever process you went through to get to the answer, and then give you the next problem or question based on what we were learning from you. So really adaptive learning in that space. And so again, there's a spectrum, and some of it is very standard because we've been through it, and some of it is really pushing the envelope, trying to create intelligent learning environments for people, which I find to be very exciting.
And in that example, that's specifically tailored for the individual and how they interact with the content.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. So then you increase engagement to the point where there's always been kind of a challenge when you have, let's say, 100 people, and a portion of those people know the content already, they're bored, a portion of them are lost, and people in the middle are really kind of where education has been targeted. But if you're able to figure out how to know where the learner sits, what is their background, what is their point of knowledge, and tailor that learning experience to them, then everybody gets exactly what they need, and it's really more engaging and interesting for that learner.
Yeah, it's rather like personalized medicine, but for education instead, right?
Exactly.
Fascinating. And so you did this for 13 years. You'd founded the company without really knowing it, on the basis of working with a number of clients. And I mean, I guess some of the clients you worked with were pretty well-known organizations. As you reflect, what was it that they were actually buying from you? I mean, what was it that you were offering that others weren't? Was it a technology? Was it an approach, or was it just the fact that you've been doing it for so long that you could zero on their needs and meet them very, very quickly? I'm just curious, because it's a blue chip client base you had, isn't it?
Sure, and I was very honored and lucky, if you will, to work for some really great clients. And sometimes it was myself as an independent. Sometimes I brought kind of my friends with me. Sometimes I slotted into kind of internal teams and led them or contributed to them. And I think what they were really buying was you hear about the role instructional designer. Or a learning designer. I consider myself to be a learning designer. And what that means is I'm able to have a conversation with a subject matter expert, really figure out what is it about whatever we are trying to help somebody learn. Help me understand the process. What are people doing? What do they have to do and know in order to kind of gather a set of expertise? What are the common mistakes? What are the pitfalls that come when you're learning something new? And then taking that process and that ability to talk to somebody, any area of expertise, to talk to companies that I had no interest in or prior or knowledge of, and really trying to step into the shoes of someone who didn't know something, figure out how they would have learned something, and then having the educational experience we build mirror that. And so think about learning how to drive a car. Well, what are the things that what are the pitfalls you might run into when you're learning how to drive a car? Everybody there's a certain set, we call them common mistakes, people make every time. And so really trying to identify what those are, so that if you are, including assessments, you're including activities, and you know that people are going to make those common mistakes, how do we notice them when people make them, give them feedback, so at the point of need, they're getting what they need in order to learn something. So it was that whole kind of methodology of learning design. And then the ability to then communicate with the technologists who are actually, if we're doing something technology enabled, the developers who are actually developing the system and making it come to life for us.
Got it. So this is Mark Bidwell interviewing Pamay Bassey on the Innovation Ecosystem podcast. Now, Pamay, we now get to a really interesting, an even more interesting stage in your career or your journey. This is where you kicked off your project, the 52 Weeks of Worship project. So can you just explain what triggered it and what was it? And then we can get into the conversation around that.
Sure. So, it's funny because the project really was triggered by a very personal, for a very personal reason. I had what I called a very personally challenging year. Mm-hmm. And one year I lost my mother and my grandmother. and ended a relationship. So at the end of that year, I was just basically at the point where I was questioning everything about life. And I think anyone who's kind of been through, lost somebody or lost the love has had their whole world kind of crumble, has been to that point where you think, well, I've done some things in my life. I've seen some successes, but I've lost some people who really mean a lot to me. What am I going to do to heal and come back to the point where I'm as strong as I was? And I've always had an interest in philosophy and religion. What I studied at Stanford was a major called Symbolic Systems, which was computer science, but also had philosophy and psychology and linguistics. And I've always been interested in kind of coming at an issue from various perspectives and various different thought processes. And so I really decided to just make a personal promise that I was going to be in a different place of worship every week for a year from all religious traditions. And that was the genesis, if you will, no pun intended, of this project. Was it really like that? Sorry for interrupting. Was it really like that? I mean, because it's a remark. I can understand that, having been in a similar situation, I can understand the need to do something. But you got very specific, a different place of worship every week for 52 weeks. How did you actually land on that concept? Well, for me, it was just a need to see people, and I'm going to get very theological here. Okay. Having been through a tough time and realizing that I didn't really have a strong spiritual basis to draw from. And why was that? I had been raised in a specific religious tradition. It was not something that I felt was as useful as I needed it to be when I was going through the fire, if you will. And so really wanted to say, okay, I want to see how people do this every day out there. How do they search for the divine? How do they celebrate their pains? How do they celebrate their victories and go through their pains, and just in a lot of different ways, and wanting to see divinity everywhere to perhaps convince me that there was hope for the future. And so it sounds very kind of baked now, but really it was just, where are you, divine? Where are you, God? I'm looking for you everywhere. And that's where the kind of, I'm just going to go to a different place every week and see what I see and see what people are doing in various contexts to search for the divine.
And so, I mean, you visited 52 different places of worship, and some of them are unsurprising. We'd recognize them, but some of them are a little bit more different. So I think there was one which was you worshipped in the Church of the Great Outdoors, which I loved. But let's pull out a couple of really sort of rich examples where either you were enormously surprised by what you found or moved by what you found. And anything that comes to mind over that 52-week physical and metaphorical journey, as it were?
Sure, absolutely. I think one of the things that was most memorable about the journey was, it really was a way for me to heal, but it was also a way for me to honor my father. He was a force in my life, a physician and a philosopher, and someone who encouraged me to look for wisdom wherever I could find it. So although he emphasized kind of achievement on the academic and the professional side, he always thought it was important to have that balance. And so a lot of times I would go to a place. I remember a place that I went to in Mexico. It was very early in my process. It was called La Viña and the vineyard. And it was a pretty unremarkable kind of location, and the service was not something that you might not see anywhere. But a song played, and it was his favorite song. And so I was reminded there that the people that that leave your life don't leave you forever. And so I saw him in various places. There were other places, that I went to that I say have more kind of commentary around them. I went to the Scientologists and spent some time with them. I went to a Wiccan festival and spent some time with them, and that's an earth religion. Some people call them witches. I went to my family is from Nigeria, West Africa. I went to a very large kind of sprawling, extremely Pentecostal Christian service in Nigeria, West Africa, and the energy there was really memorable. So I tried to spread out, and I went to a number of Catholic masses. I went to a lot of some mosques and some synagogues, so things that were a little less on the fringes, but I tried to experience as much as I could across the spectrum so that I was able to really challenge myself and learn some new things.
And clearly this was not it was a systematic process you went through, but I guess there would have been, ups and downs, peaks and troughs. Were there any of your, you said earlier on you didn't necessarily have any, major religious beliefs going in, but were there any of your beliefs that were actually fundamentally shaken by what you experienced, by what you saw, what you heard, and also were there any beliefs that were reinforced by that process? so shaken
Sure.
first. What happened?
Yeah, so I mean, I was raised as a Christian. I would have said that I was going in. I just feel like, prior to this journey, me saying that didn't have as much power and force and authenticity behind it as it might now. It was just something that I had experienced growing up. So it wasn't that I didn't have any beliefs. I just don't feel that they were as powerful as they should have been. And so it's amazing. I mean, I went to so many different places within my own religious tradition that challenged me. I went to a Christian mystic church in Chicago and sat there the whole time thinking, holy cow, I'm supposed to believe this. Do I believe that? Wait, what about that? And really questioning everything that I was hearing and putting it side by side with what I purported to believe. And I think that really gave me the inspiration and motivation to say, you should really strengthen your own personal journey, because if you're going to say you are something, it should mean something. Went to a number of Catholic masses and thought, this is really great. I really enjoy the liturgy and I enjoy kind of the structure, but then went to one mass where the priest was very specific. It says, this is what Catholics believe. And if you don't believe these things, you can't be Catholic. And I came away saying, well, I guess I can't be Catholic, because there were some things that I thought, well, I don't really believe that. And just because I like, kind of the songs and the order of service doesn't mean that I can. So I was challenged many times, even within my own religious tradition, to really say, okay, Pamay, what do you mean when you say you believe this or you don't believe that? And what kind of person are you going to be? Are you going to be the kind of person who can stand up and say, you have some force behind the words that you say and the things that you claim?
And you say, you mentioned that this was triggered by some personal tragedies or trauma, if you like. Now, Whitney Johnson, who we both know, and Whitney is the founder of the 40 over 40 program, which you're recently nominated for, and she came on the show a few months ago, and she talked about disrupting yourself. My question is, I mean, is it possible for people to access this kind of learning, this kind of experience without being triggered by such an event that you went through? So, because I think you've got people who've the book has been very popular. Lots of people have been following you. You're in conversation with a lot of them. Do you have advice for people who can to go on this kind of journey, but not necessarily have it triggered by something as dramatic as your situation?
I think it starts with a choice, right? And one of the things that I have really thought about a lot since then is just the idea of practice, and practice becoming permanent. And you're right. If something disrupts your life, and if you have a tragedy or you lose your job or something big happens, it's a more natural time to then decide, okay, let me step back and question everything that I know and what's my next steps are going to be. But I think if you create an innovation practice in your life, then that just becomes kind of part of the way that you live. Mm-hmm. That is, I'm constantly going to make sure that I'm putting myself in situations that challenge me, whether we're talking about religion or theology, but that doesn't have to be the context. It can be professionally, it can be personally, it can be kind of trying to create, a practice of lifelong learning. I think it's totally possible to create a disruption practice where you make just a very quiet choice and decision, and promise to yourself that you're constantly going to put yourself in situations that challenge you and learn from those situations. So I think, that is something that came from, kind of my project and kind of from the way that I live. But I think that you can just decide right now, this is the kind of person I'm going to be. And it can really enrich all areas of your life.
Yeah, well, and it's also, in many respects, it's a survival mechanism as well, because of the the way things are changing and the the imminence of change in the workforce and such, like as you mentioned. I mean, it's more and more likely to happen. Therefore, I think this is I understand why it's a relevant practice. So let's switch now to your current role, because after you're still running this project. The books there, you talk about it quite frequently, but you are now sort of a self-proclaimed intrepreneur working for one of the world's largest asset management firms. So what does it mean by when you say you're an intrepreneur? What do you mean by that, Pamay?
I think that means that you are able to retain the qualities and characteristics of an entrepreneur, but it's not your business, right? So when I was running my own business with my clients, it was me trying to figure out what solutions made sense for them. It was me selling the work. It was me using my own resources. Now working for a very large company, where my clients are the employees of the company, and within a very entrepreneurial, if you will, culture. So this company, although it is, it's approaching 30 years old, it is very young in the industry and still really values people who are able to come and bring ideas to the table that can move things forward. And so I'm able to be an entrepreneur in the learning space in this company because I'm be able to have a conversation saying this is the best way that we can give people the learning they need at the right time, the right place to help them be successful. It is not a very kind of staid and concrete culture where we're just doing the same thing we've always been doing. People value the bringing of new ideas to the table. Let's try this. Let's pilot that. Or that didn't work. That did work. Fail fast. Make sure you have people around you who are asking critical questions. And so it really gives me the opportunity to be innovative within the construct of a larger company.
And I mean, we've had a number of intrapreneurs on the show in the past, and it's an area. I suppose I would describe myself, or have described myself, as an intrapreneur. I mean, to what in my corporate world anyway, in my previous life, what are the things that you brought into this role from your previous experiences? What are the capabilities that have helped you succeed in the role, but also what's got in the way of your performance, if you like, or your ability to get everything done?
So one of the big things that we started conversations with just as soon as I started was what we talked about earlier, which is what is the best delivery mechanism for learning. And at this particular company, the majority of learning that we were doing when I got there was face-to-face. So that is classroom-based, 3 hours, 4 hours in a room talking about a specific topic. The facilitators trying to be creative and interesting within that, but really not using technology-enabled learning in any real kind of way, and wanting to come in and say, let's try different things to see if we can, because it's a global company. We've got employees all around the world, and although the majority of our employees are kind of in New York, London, San Francisco, there are people who are in offices that are not in those three places, and wanting to make sure there's a democratization of learning, and technology is one of the ways to do that. So bringing that conversation about let's try different technology-enabled learning was one of the first kind of points of innovation. But on the flip side, to answer the second part of your question, really trying to figure out, well, there is a culture here. What works within that culture, right? So if there's an expectation that learning happens one way, how do you switch to a different way? What is the way to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success as learning professionals and not trying things that are just outside of the culture or too fast? So trying to kind of pace innovation at the same speed as what the culture can consume, while not, missing opportunities to move things forward in terms of the different ways that learning is happening in the organization.
Yeah, and I should imagine, knowing a little bit about the financial services industry, you're overwhelmed by compliance and regulation coming out of 2008, and that presumably is a major part of the mandate of your function, I would imagine. Is that fair?
Sure. Yeah. Mandatory and compliance training is part of my function. And it's amazing that you mentioned that, because a few years ago, e-learning became a way to deliver some of that mandatory and compliance training. That is one space where people kind of expect at this point to receive learning via technology, because it really is, there's information, there are things you need to know, and everybody needs to know it. So the technology is a way that has worked. There are other places where perhaps people may think, well, how do I learn presentation skills or communication skills or some of the softer skills using technology? And that's where there's some areas where we're saying, well, let's find some innovative ways that people are doing that. So it's kind of different types of learning, and some historically or in the recent history have been types of learning that we can use technology for, and some are more new.
Yeah. And I should imagine, the other piece, I guess, big item is the mad rush of a lot of people out of the doors of large established financial services companies into the arms of the to go and work for fintech startups. How do you how do you think about what capabilities need to be built in the organization to make, I'm thinking perhaps at the leadership level, to make that journey less attractive for a young graduate who really wants to do something exciting, wants to be involved in a really fast-moving, innovative space, and might even think that the large incumbents are at risk of being disrupted by all these fintech startups. It's clearly not quite that simple. But how do you think about that as a lifelong learner, professional learner, if you like?
Sure. I mean, I think that one of the things that we try to do when part of my title is Director of Professional Development is really provide learning opportunities throughout the life cycle of an employee where they feel like they're being challenged, where they feel like they're learning new things, where they feel like they are growing. So from the very beginning, when people come from campus, so employees start as analysts on day one, giving them orientation that's interesting and engaging and relevant all the way through their career at every promotion point, while they're in a particular role, saying, what do you need to be successful? What do you need in order to feel like you're growing and learning in this role? So that when people feel like they're growing and learning, then they perhaps are less likely to look elsewhere for other challenges, whether that be, as I mentioned in my own journey, like I went to a startup because I felt like I should be doing something more kind of interesting and innovative and groundbreaking. And there are pros and cons to, as you know, as we all know, being an entrepreneur and going that route. So currently in my position, just trying to make sure we're providing the kind of learning experiences that keep people engaged and interested, and hope that will then translate into kind of longer careers and internal mobility and wanting to stay and contribute their talents in our company.
Yeah, got it. So beginning to wrap this up. The 40 Women Over 40 award that you've been recommended for, if you like. Can you just say a little bit about that? And the second question is plans for the future. I mean, because there are a number of threads through your career. There's some common threads, but there are also some quite different things in there. I'm just interested about how are you thinking about the future, given that you have been awarded one of these 40 over 40 innovative, disruptive people, women making an impact, if you like.
I mean, I love the 40 over 40 award and just so honored to have received it because the tagline, right, is women who are reinventing and disrupting and making an impact, correct? So It is, in one way, a nice award and recognition of what I've been doing, but really it is a challenge to continue to do it, right? And so every day when I'm sitting in my desk, I'm thinking, well, what am I doing actually to disrupt? How can I continue to be committed to innovation in this space? And whether that be at my day-to-day job or my 52 Weeks of Worship project. So really, I think it's great to be part of a cohort of women who we can encourage each other to continue to do that which we had started doing so that we got recognized for this honor.
And have you got, and in that, the peer pressure, the observation that people are doing very different things from you, I mean, have you got any sort of embryonic ideas about something similar to the 52 Weeks of Worship project for the future at some point, or is it? Are you? Is that a one-off? Do you think?
Well, I mean, I think what ends up happening is because I am somebody who's a connector of ideas and of people, it ends up. I'm really interested in the ideas that I learned from that project being impactful in other arenas, right? So value-based leadership, like what gets people out of bed in the morning? How do you create leadership training experiences that take into account the whole process that I went through, which is putting yourself in various different, wildly different scenarios, thinking about what you believe, engaging with other people. And we talk about diversity a lot in the business world now, diversity of thought. And it really, again, is a practice to be able to say, I need to know who I am and what I believe, but I also need to engage with people who are from different backgrounds and different walks of life, have different experiences, so we can dialogue. I can push on the things that I think I believe and actually come out to know what I truly believe, and then stand in that power while respecting others who are in various different camps and who might believe things that are different. So I think that my project continues to kind of impact everything that I do. And I think about kind of what the next book I'm going to write is. I have a background in comedy. I think it's probably going to be a little lighter than the one that I wrote about philosophy and religion. But yeah, I have a lot of things percolating, but nothing specific that I could announce at this point.
Well, we have to keep in touch because it's a fascinating story. And as you said, when we first spoke, I mean, the diversity of thought, of practice, of tradition that you've kind of experienced over the 52 weeks is, it's very rich. And as you eloquently, pointed out, it's got real value in the workplace. So Pamay, where can people get in touch with you?
So you certainly come by my website, my52wow.com. That's my52WOW. That's my blog. I continue to have experiences in various communities and write about them. And then you can also email me that way through the blog.
brilliant. And we'll put all that. We'll put the book. We'll put the links in the show notes. So I sent you 3 questions, and we got very close to you answering one of them before, but I managed to start. We kept off that. But the first question: what have you changed your mind about recently?
That's really interesting. I was thinking about that question. I thought, I just actually went to the Aspen Institute last week for their executive seminar. And part of that process is reading some of the, some might say the foundational greats, Aristotle, Plato, Confucius, Machiavelli. I could go on and on, but really the people who have thought about kind of liberty and equality and some really difficult topics. And it reinforced, so not necessarily changing my mind, but reinforcing the need to know yourself. And we talked about this a little bit, your beliefs, your values, what drives you, what matters to you, and to engage in discussion with intelligent and motivated people around these topics so that you can figure out, where you stand, and then expose yourself to other ideas, to the idea of diversity of thought and saying, it helps to know who you are, but in terms of leadership practice and wanting to be the best leader that you can, being able to respect others and figure out if they have gone through that same process of learning and growing and determining what they believe and respecting that. So I would say that one of the things that I was kind of reinforced in my mind recently is the importance of knowing self and being able to not live in an echo chamber, but challenge yourself in great discussions with people so that you can become a better person and a better leader. Yeah,
I mean, the concept there, another concept that comes to mind is, to have an opinion requires a huge amount of work, actually, and many people people just jump to something that sounds that sounds convenient or might fit their worldview without actually having done the hard work to figure out whether that's the case or not. And essentially that's one of the big themes in your 52 weeks as well. Great. Second question: the practices. What do you do to remain creative and innovative? I mean, clearly we talked about the 52-week project, but what are you doing today? What's your innovation creativity practice?
So the second thing that I did when the startup that I work for died, if you will, may it rest in peace, was study at Second City, which is a improvisational comedy and theater in Chicago. And I studied improv. I went to their conservatory for 2 years to immerse myself in the world of improv and comedy. And so in terms of staying creative, I write. Obviously, I'm a writer. I read an enormous amount and still read physical books. I'm not yet the Kindle person, even though I am a technology person. I like physical books. But I spend time doing improv games and spending time with my theater friends and doing improv. And I actually just signed up to do a one-woman show at the end of November. And that is really just to keep my creative juices flowing and to challenge myself to get in front of a group and actually, make them laugh and make myself laugh. And again, it becomes relevant even in my professional life, because when you're in front of a room, no matter what you're talking about, people like to be entertained. But it's the whole area, that kind of the creative world of improv and writing is where I try to spend time so that I can stay kind of on the cutting edge of my creativity.
Yeah, and that'll also put you out of your comfort zone a little bit as well, I'd imagine.
That is true. True.
Yeah. And final question, to what would you attribute your success in life?
I really think it is lifelong learning. From the very beginning, my parents, all the way through every kind of academic and professional experience that I've had, I've been surrounded by people who value learning, who don't take it for granted. I have a peer group, which you mentioned, I mean, just even the 40 over 40, but just throughout all of my academic and professional pursuits, just phenomenal people who have accomplished a great deal. The ones who I count in my inner circle are very humble about it, but we're all lifelong learners and all very clear that we need to continue to be that in order to be the people that we want to be. And I think that is really the foundation of my success. And the other thing I would say is a commitment to reinvention and allowing myself, depending on what life throws at me, to say, okay, well, now I need to just take a quick turn here and try something completely new. I've done it a couple of times. And it's none of that, as you mentioned, is easy, but it has been the foundation of me kind of continuing to learn and grow and put myself in situations where I'm able to meet great people and do great things. And so I'll continue as long as I have to.
Exactly. Well, and it's funny because a lot of our listeners will resonate. It'll resonate very strongly because disruption is a regular theme, and learning and development. What I'm trying to do here is pull out the insights from authors, from thought leaders, from performers from a number of different areas, and make them available to people in a format that is easily absorbable and consumable. And I think one of the things that you've re-emphasized to me on this call has been just how important that is to remain fresh on a number of different levels. So Pamay, this has been great. Thank you very, very much for your time. It's been a great pleasure having you on the show. I'm sure our audience enjoyed it as much as I did, and thanks very much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, this is Mark Bidwell again. So plenty in there. Firstly, the innovation practice that she has built or developed for herself, the habits of innovation, the habits of lifelong learning, which she's able to bring into the workplace and integrate into all parts of her life. Secondly, diversity. This is clearly a big subject for her, given that the book itself was entitled 52 Weeks of Worship and required her to expose herself to diverse groups of religious and spiritual traditions. But it goes way beyond that. Diversity for her means exposing herself to different types of people, different environments, and that's characterized by her involvement in Second City, the improvisation theatre group, which, as she says, is of value in the workplace, as well as forcing her out of her comfort zone to continue to raise the bar and to continue to march on the journey, on the lifelong learning journey. And then thirdly, the power of proximity came out very clearly as she talked about the importance of being part of this group of 40 over 40. Power of proximity, the language used by Gillian Zoe Seagal in an earlier episode at the end of season 1, where she tracked down a number of very, very credentialed businessmen, entrepreneurs and women and entrepreneurs around the world. Wrote a great book about it. And if you haven't listened to that episode, I do urge you to listen to it, because she really does unpack what success looks like from a number of very, very credentialed individuals who are well-known family names or business names across large parts of the world. So the importance here of proximity, bringing it back to Pamay, is how Pamay finds being part of this group of 40 over 40 of women who are disrupting, who are having an impact, who are deeply innovative, helps her sharpen her saw, helps her raise her standards, helps her continue to perform. And that's reassuring, because she's packed a huge amount into her life and yet continues to be enthusiastic about making a contribution across not just in the corporate world, but in a wide range of areas. So plenty in there, plenty of knowledge in terms of taking it forward. Urge you to reflect on what is it that you can do by way of creating an innovation practice, a lifelong learning practice, to help you start to generate some of the results that some of our previous guests and Pamay have generated, and to help you have impact in your organization or in your community or in your life. So if you like that show, please leave us some reviews on iTunes. Check out the transcript, check out the video. You can also, in the show links, you can have a look at Pamay's book and some of the other work that she's doing. Please come back to me if you've got any questions, and feel free to share this with anyone who you think would benefit from being part of the innovation ecosystem. Until next time, have a great week.